Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to All Together, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by Ella Massell, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Now, let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking about familial relationships. Especially long distance. And I know that we've spoken about this another time when we've had Lou on and talking about how she does it during long distance. But today is completely different perspective and how it sort of helped in a familial relationship when a child leaves their family and are able to sort of rekindle their sort of love for one another. So today, to help me talk about this and to be a special guest on it is a first person, and one of my friends has come onto the show and decided to come and help me. We've got Marie Stella here to talk about her sort of journey into being joining together as a family. How are you going today, Marie?
Fine, thank you. Excellent jingle. I really liked it. I was bopping to it earlier. What was your question again?
I just said hi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
So can you talk a little bit more about sort of how you've sort of come onto the show when you're talking about familial relationships, and we're going into a little bit more your journey as to how you sort of got closer with your family because of the distance?
Right, yeah. I think because when I grew up with my family in Singapore, it was a very traditionalist household. It's actually not as traditionalist as most Asian families that I know, but for me, I think it's more because I am pretty unconventional in the sense of like my personality and everything that I believe in is just very different from what I was brought up to believe or what my parents believe. So I never really felt like I could be fully myself there. They still like supported me all the way through my life, and so although we have a lot of differences, I think the distance has really helped to like put some, I don't know, it's really helped to make me feel a bit more sentimental and grateful with what I've been brought up with, because when you're in it, you can't really, you're kind of blinded by all of the differences that you have to navigate through and all the challenges that come with it. But then you remove those and then you remember that things to be thankful for. So I think that's where I'm coming from. Yeah.
I think that's amazing. Before we get deeper into it, and I'd love to talk about this a bit more, we love to start off with a little get to know you icebreaker. And I showed you what the list was before.
Yeah.
So we'll just go down it and just share the first thing that sort of comes to your mind.
Right.
So the first one is your favorite movie.
Favorite movie is Coraline. I wish I could say something a bit more poetic and something that make me sound smarter, but Coraline, when I first watched it as preteen,
Yeah.
Preteen. I was so mesmerized by it just because I think I related to Coraline a lot in terms of not wanting to be in that like household you were brought up in and wanting a different mother, as painful as it is for any parent to hear. But it's like, as a kid, you know, there's some things that you wish could be different in how you're brought up and wanting to just run away. I think that's how I related to Coraline a lot. And I didn't realize earlier on when I was first watching it that I like her life pretty much parallels mine, because I didn't realize that whole thing of, oh, you wish for something else but it's not necessarily the best for you. And then so watching it again as an adult, really there was like a second wave of love for it, and this time around it's like an added layer of relating to it as well. And of course I love the mix of like horror and animation and comedy. Yeah, it's beautiful, and there are a lot of like little Easter eggs that just drive me insane. Love them. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with Coraline. I feel like when you watch it as an adult, it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, you're like, oh, it's spooky, it's scary.
Yeah.
But when you get older, there's a whole different sort of meaning.
Yeah, there's
Into
so much symbolism.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoy.
Yeah. And us being film students, we see straight through that.
Yeah. You're just like analyzing all the way every single second, and it gets tiring. So I've only actually watched it 3 times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I haven't seen it a lot, actually.
No, I think like I watch it once in every stage of my life. So I watched it once when it first came out in theaters because my mom thought it was a cute little cartoon. Ooh.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. and then I loved it. Didn't get half of it because I was stupid.
Yeah.
My brain wasn't fully developed. So I watched it again.
Yeah.
I think when I was a young adult, but even then I didn't really fully get it. I just like appreciated it. But then I watched it another time like last year when I had nothing to do.
Yep.
And I was like, holy shit. Yeah, I think it reclaimed the spot because it wasn't always my favorite show. I think Ragnarok was up there for a really, really long time, but that's because I'm a basic Marvel
Yeah.
bitch.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the next one is a favorite podcast of yours.
Podcast, right? I listened to this podcast a lot during COVID, like I think third COVID lockdown, when I needed to consume as much media as I could to get my mind off anything or to get anything into my mind, to be honest. Behind the Bastards by Robert Evans is fantastic.
Okay.
He basically goes into everything that's going on in the minds of these monstrous figures of history. So anything from like Hitler
Yeah.
to other like more obscure people that you might not have even heard of, but apparently have done some horrible, horrible things. It's an amazing podcast because it's not just dark. His sense of humor also helps to like lighten it up a bit, because sometimes when you're talking about dark things, you have to like cope with all of this heavy content, and how do you like just lighten that up with some humor. Yeah, so I do enjoy that a lot.
No, that sounds like a really interesting show. Just to keep, is it like weekly or is it?
I'm not sure if it's weekly. I don't keep up with it as much anymore. But I think I discovered the podcast like halfway through one of like I think season 1 or 2. So I had a ton of content to just like binge listen.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I do recommend it.
The next one is a famous role model of yours.
Maddie Healy from the 1975.
Okay.
Yeah, for various reasons. I like his perspective on the human experience and how no one is like a one-dimensional figure, and how it's okay to be fluctuating through different perspectives in life. Like you're always going to change your mind. That's just part of being a human.
Yeah.
No one is inherently good or inherently bad, and emotions are emotions. You might experience like some of them have negative connotations to it, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Like it's okay, just own it. And I think I really like that, especially of recent, like becoming 25 is very different from turning 21, which you don't realize when you're 21.
Yeah.
Because when you're 21, you're like, oh, I know a bunch of shit. Like, I'm being an adult now. I'm an adult. I'm all grown up and stuff. And you're like trying to be a good person and everything. And then I think when you're turning 25 or like towards your later years of 20s, you start to realize, hey, it's okay to not know everything. You're never going to know everything in life. And it's okay. Like, if you're a shit person, you're a shit person. Like, that's fine. Like, own it. Everyone has tough times. Everyone has low points in their life. I think it's just about kind of accepting that. And, like, as long as you're trying, you know, it's okay to just be yourself.
Well, I love that. I actually didn't know that he had such a deep sort of meaning.
Yeah, because all of his songs, lyrically, they sound like they're about nothing or just about drugs or just about sex.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot that has to do with kind of owning that maybe you are Epicurean, maybe you have these desires, you have these fantasies, but that's part of being human.
That's really interesting. I gotta sort of look into his songs a little bit more, and then rather than just hear it, probably have to read it now.
Yeah, his lyricism is fantastic because there's always that like first and second listen, right? The first listen, you're always like, ooh, yeah, this is a vibe. Why is he talking about someone smelling like shit? That doesn't make any sense. And then you go read the lyrics and you're like, oh, this is why. Yeah. And you realize that every single line has a purpose to it. It's very precise. It's very concise. And really appreciate that.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. All right. So the next one is a favorite course that you've completed.
Course that I completed. Well, I did a diploma in mass communications.
Okay.
When I was in Singapore.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call it my favorite, but because it was a very intense time. It was one of the, I think it was like the top course in mass communications, like throughout Singapore. And it cost me like an arm and a leg to get into. It was very competitive, and all the people there were smart as, and I just barely got in. I did everything I could to get in, and then I very soon realized that I was way out of my league here because everyone else just kind of breezed through. Oh, not breezed through, but like they got in just fine, just being themselves. And so it was very intense, but at the same time, it was so enriching with like the skill set, the range that they teach you. They don't hold your hand, but they don't throw you in deep water either. Yeah. So I do appreciate that bit. And I did make some good friends there. Very, very few, like a handful of them I still keep up with. Yeah. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's definitely the most memorable.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really good one. I think, especially with that question, you can pretty much do any course anything that is sort of really stuck to you. Yeah. And that's definitely one.
Essentially, yeah. And I think like it allowed me to kind of choose where I wanted to go, because now like from there I did get experience with like not real working experience, but like I learned a bit of everything, like from TV production to like graphic design, social media, marketing, and then writing as well. So it just opened up a lot of doors for me.
Yeah, that's great.
Which was my starting point.
Yeah. So now we're going to go into the point of the show today and talking a little bit about that. So I know you've spoken a little bit about your family life at the beginning, and can you sort of tell us a little bit more about what your family was like?
My family, when I was growing up, because I was a single child for like 6 years, and then two brothers came along afterwards. So I was a single child for quite a while, and I suppose as the oldest child, you're kind of like the guinea pig. So my parents were testing me with the very like typical Asian method of tiger mom and stuff. Like I get yelled at for not scoring a B in math or something, at least a B. And I was not like a mathematical genius or anything. Oh, that's obviously a stretch. But like I sucked at math, had no interest in it. Why would I? Yeah. And at some point, I think it was like when I was 12.
Yeah.
We hadn't learned algebra yet. Like that was secondary school stuff. But my mom just assumed that I had to know what algebra was. It's so easy.
Yeah.
So when I didn't know why is she putting all these alphabets into numbers, I was just so confused.
Okay.
And she yelled at me. She was livid. And I think that was like the defining moment where I was like, yeah, I was just like, this is not for me. This life is not for me. It's too hard.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also because I had dyslexia, right? I have dyslexia. So I have trouble like concentrating and organizing my thoughts. But my parents didn't know for the longest time.
Okay.
So they were using all these like typical traditionalist Asian methods of discipline to kind of like scare me into doing my work. But it was never gonna work out because I'm not neurotypical, but they didn't know it yet. So back then, that's how it was.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew up. And that's why I didn't feel like home was a home for me. And that's why I tried to lock myself in my room a lot, because I felt like anytime I go outside, I'd be succumbed to this kind of treatment. But don't get me wrong, like I was a horrible kid. Like I think there are a few times I learned very quickly how to forge my parents' signature.
Okay.
I didn't realize that was a bad thing when I was younger. Even when they scolded me, I thought they just wanted to scold me. And then my dad had to come in and be like, I used to be in the police. I can arrest you. But for some reason that didn't register. I was like, well, if you don't catch me, you can't arrest me. So I just kept doing it anyway with my like report cards.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, like, I didn't want to get scolded. I couldn't really do much about like my lack of motivation in school. Like, you know, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't being taught like how to get by, like the proper way. I was just being scolded all the time, put in a corner, caned, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I just kept forging signatures. It was hard. It was a bad time.
Like, especially when you didn't know. Like, there was no label for dyspraxia as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that, like, neurodivergent, neurotypical is not something that we grew up ever knowing.
Yeah, and to my parents' credit, they didn't know either.
Yeah.
And I think they're just doing their best, trying to...
They're doing what they knew.
Yeah, they're doing what they grew up with.
Yeah.
They're doing what they were taught.
Yeah.
So... But back then I didn't know.
No.
And that's why I hated them.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Like, as a kid, that there's no other way, like, especially when you get into trouble for things that you can't control. Yeah. And then you just see it as, okay, they just want to get you into trouble. Whereas there is actually something that you needed to sort of go talk to someone about. And they didn't know. Yeah. Like they didn't know, you didn't know. So how are you going to sort of explain it?
Yeah, and I think like different kids need different types of discipline.
Yes.
Kids are very much like cats as well. You give them too much like negative reinforcement, and they're gonna think is that you are punishing them for everything.
Yep.
And they're just gonna
lash
lash
scared
out.
of everything.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I think that's where I was coming from as a kid. Just couldn't really express what I wanted to, and also the fact that I was pushed into doing a lot of things that I didn't really want to do, like piano and like swimming. I just didn't have the urge or the inkling to do any of it. But as like Asian parents, they're like, well, you've got to do something. And I'm like, no, I want to play the guitar. And they're like, what for? Like, what are you going to do with the guitar? Well, what am I going to do with the piano? You know? And it's like a whole back and forth of like, well, I'm interested in this. Well, that's not going to work out. Yeah.
No, exactly. So what were some of the challenges that you faced? Like, what were some other challenges you faced when sort of socializing with them and being around them that sort of really put you into your own little bubble?
I think it comes in, well, I think I've said this before. No, I've not said this before. I have expressed it in a similar way. It comes in waves, right?
Yeah.
So the first wave is like when you're a child. That's like the very basic first like emphasis on like you can't be yourself, you have to be this person. And then as a teen it comes again in like, well, now I'm expressing that I'm interested in these certain things, and it takes a long time for them to come around and be like, oh, I understand, well, maybe we can do something about it. And so when you have to like argue your way through like what you're really interested in, for me it was guitar, it gets frustrating at a certain point, and then you start like kind of learning subconsciously that your interests are not welcome or not good enough, or you have to argue your way through things that you like, if it's unconventional. And then I think that was what reinforced it subconsciously for me. And then as an adult or like a young adult, it started becoming more of like a I think there was one time I was sitting at the dinner table, and I've always been very like liberal, you know, whereas Singapore is just not that kind of place, and that's where I was living at that point in time with my family. So there would be news articles about how there's like a trans doctor or like a doctor doing cosmetic surgery for like a trans person, or someone going to Thailand to get their gender reassignment surgery or something. And my parents would show me the headline and be like, isn't this crazy? And this is so weird. And I have to sit there being like, well, no. But like, again, I was taught from a young age, intentionally or unintentionally, that whenever I disagree with them, I would get punished for it. I'd get told off or something like that. So I couldn't bring it. I didn't have it in me to stand up and be like, no, it's not that weird. Like, this is why. And like, kind of argue my standpoint. I felt like I didn't have individuality because of what was taught to me earlier on. And also because they were so adamant and passionate about like queerness being weird, whether it's being gay or being trans or anything like that. So obviously I couldn't look them in the eye and be like, well, you're wrong.
No, exactly.
You know, like I know that I get some shit for it. And I kind of went into flight mode. I kind of just tuned it out. I just like wanted to be back in my room. I didn't want to be there. Like it just hurts.
It took it took a lot of effort to keep arguing with them, is have like a different opinion. So then the more effort it takes, the more you just sort of give up and just say that's them, you're different, that kind of thing. Like it's the difference of opinion. I feel like when it comes to the difference of opinion, it's good for everyone has their own opinion about things, but for parents to not hear the side of the kids and to also sort of reinforce the fact that it's my opinion and that's how you're going to think. So how I think is how you're going to think. And that's something that, like, I grew up with that as well. And it took me until I was about in my early 20s to be like, okay, I have my own way of thinking and to figure out what I'm thinking. Like because I wasn't the kind of person that would fight. You're a lot stronger. You would rebel back a little bit more. I wouldn't.
No, I would not rebel.
Not
more
directly, but you'd hide away.
Yeah, well, I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think that can be considered rebelling.
It's sort of like taking yourself out of the situation.
Yeah, I don't think that's rebelling
well,
at all. I think that's just running.
Well, it's better to run sometimes than to stay and sit there and listen to it all.
Yeah.
But like you're able to take yourself out of the situation. There are a lot of like kids who just like for me, for example, I didn't. I just stood there and took it every single time it happened. I just stood there and took it. And it's so different to when you're like, because you're trying to think, okay, am I doing the wrong thing, or is it just because what they say is wrong? And it's so different to sort of having to deal with it, especially as you get older. Like, I do want to know, how would you describe your relationship with your parents now?
It's a lot better now. I feel like I can find it in myself to spend quality time with them. Whereas previously, when I was living in Singapore indefinitely, I would use any excuse to just avoid social interaction. Like I know more or less what time my family would be having breakfast or lunch or something like that, and I just avoid it. I stay in my room even if I'm hungry, even if I'm starving. I just like stay in my room and like do fuck all until I know they're out of the house, and then I go down and have breakfast. Whereas now, I think the last time I went back to Singapore for 3 weeks, I spent a lot more time with them. Like if my mom wanted to get breakfast or lunch, I'd go with her and did groceries with her, did a lot more family stuff with her. I think that's a result of several things. Like, for example, living alone for 4 years is one of them. Like not having someone to do groceries with all the time. You know, it's a nice change of pace. She also drives, so that helps. Whereas I don't. So it's nice easier. Like getting groceries without having to take the tram and walk for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that does help.
Yeah. And then the second one is, of course, like, you know, I'm starting to realize as adults, like she doesn't feel the need to punish me as often, so I can crack jokes without her turning it to a life lesson, you know, or like some kind of lecture. Yeah. And I think I've also, because like I found the sweet spot of like what's okay to joke about and what's not.
Okay. Yeah.
So, like, sometimes I still like push it a bit. Yeah. But like I kind of now know where it's at, where I just don't go into the territory of like I'm gonna be lectured now. So yeah. Having that little like those conversations that don't have any negative repercussions to it helps. It's nice. It makes me feel more connected. There's also this like, I suppose, like filial piety thing, but I do have to acknowledge, like, my parents are paying for my uni, right? They've been supporting me the whole time. Yeah. So obviously I feel like not that my presence is a gift by any means. It's just like I feel like I owe it to them to have some sort of relationship. It's not fair for me to just like take money from them and then fuck off and be like, you guys suck. Yeah. You know, like, that's kind of mean. That's kind of rude. And like, again, they were not shitty parents. They were just doing what they thought was best. Yeah. That's like that. I think that's the underlying theme of my relationship with my parents. Like, I keep reminding myself that, yes, there was trauma, but that's just from my side of it. They didn't intend for that to happen. Yeah. They never, like, abused me or anything like that. So, yeah, that's been, I think I've just reminded that to myself every time I'm like when I'm living alone, having like, you know, those sad girl moments and just like, oh, why was I like this? Yeah, I just remind myself that a lot of the time, and it's just nice to have people around again that you know will stick by you, almost no matter what. I don't think they'll stick by me no matter what, to be completely honest, but through most things that other people might not. I think is why I decided like I should maintain this relationship with my parents. And it's just, what was the question again? I feel like I'm not answering it.
No, you did. And like, so going into it a little bit more, do you think that the distance really helped in the fact of how your relationship is with them now?
Oh, 100%. I think because like I didn't hear nagging every single day.
Yeah.
It helped me remember the good times. It helped me remember the better part of my relationship with my parents, you know. And the fact that they've been supporting me more than I could have asked for my whole life. I think is something that I realized when I had the distance. And that's something that like if I didn't have that distance and I was living with them through COVID, I don't think I'd think the same way. I honestly think I would have wanted to kill them at some point. I would have run away. I would have wished that I was somewhere else. I definitely would. So the distance definitely helped with that, with the being emotionally removed from the situation, like kind of taking the negative out of it and reminding myself there's good in there.
Do you think they sort of treat you more of like an adult now than they used to as well?
Oh, maybe. I suppose, but at the same time, my dad still, like, when I got my first few jobs, doing, like, actual jobs, my dad still thought I was an intern. And, like,
okay.
Yeah, I think he still thinks of me as a baby because he was going, like, he doesn't know what I'm doing. He really doesn't. He still thinks that, like, I'm doing journalism, which was, like, 2 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
And well, like, to be fair, he's still supporting me through uni, so that's completely understandable why he still thinks of me that way. But I suppose they do, I guess they do treat me with a bit more, like, maturity and less nagging, and they do see me a bit more like as an adult. I think maybe also because my brothers are growing up, so
the focus is on them a little bit more.
Yeah, and they're teens now, so it's not so much like, oh, my kids are children. Yeah, like maybe it was like back then. Maybe it was like, oh, well, my younger brothers are still kids, so they just lump us all in and be like, oh, they're children.
They're all kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't help that my dad doesn't know what I'm doing. No, it doesn't.
Well, it does make it easier, the conversations. You don't have to keep explaining what you're doing sometimes.
Well, actually, I do.
Every time?
Because, like, I don't know what it is, but every single time, he always manages to get what I'm doing wrong. Like, I think one time, this was, like, way after I've already finished my internship at, like, magazines and stuff. And I was doing writing. I was, like, a proper writer, you know. I had a fucking job. Yeah. And I was complaining to him about, like, how much work there has to be done. I'm working, like, 24/7. It's just a lot to deal with. And I'm getting paid like shit. And he goes, well, that's life, you know, that's what you're like when you're an intern. You're just getting coffee for your boss. And I'm like, babes, I'm not getting coffee from my boss. No. I'm way past that point. What are you talking about? I'm not still an intern. He goes, oh, what? When did you finish your internship? I'm like, a year ago. Like,
Oh, wow. Okay,
it
that's
was
a long
last
time.
year. It was like the start of last year.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, so that's basically my relationship with my dad. But
Yeah.
to be fair to him, he is still paying, like, he is still supporting me financially. So I don't think I can really, really, truly complain about that.
Yeah.
Or like berate him for it
Yeah.
until I'm completely financially independent,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah. So we'll have you on the show then.
sorry, what?
We'll have you on the show then. Okay, so we're going into the practice and habit bit of the show. And sort of just practices that you do to sort of maintain a relationship. Now, you've been living on your own for the past 4 years in Melbourne and sort of without them, without them seeing them constantly. How do you maintain or improve your relationship with your family given the distance?
Well, we used to do like weekly or bi-weekly Zoom calls,
Okay.
which was nice but also a bit disruptive to my social schedule.
Okay.
Because like it was nice to have that check-in,
Yeah.
right? During COVID when, well, you couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
And also my family's Catholic and they have to go for mass every week. So we had this deal where we do online mass together, and so the masses are streamed through YouTube, and so my dad would just like screen share and I just sit from Melbourne in my bedroom
And watch it.
having just woken up from a nap or something.
Yeah.
and watch it with them, and then quick catch up for 15 minutes maybe. So that was nice. I actually haven't talked to them since like last month or 2 months ago.
Okay.
But I think it's also because I just saw them when I went back
Yeah.
to Singapore, so there's no need
To like rush
to
and see them. Yeah.
Back then it was like, oh, indefinitely I wouldn't be able to see them. I don't know
Yeah.
when the next time is, so weekly check-ins were good. But yeah, they saw me a bunch. They don't need to see me again for a while.
They both need a break.
Yeah.
So when you did do the Zoom calls, what are 3 good things that you sort of felt about talking with them?
3 good things. I tend to bond with my parents on food.
Okay.
That's a language I think most of us can speak.
Yeah.
So I'd update them on what I've been cooking recently. And I used to cook a lot during COVID because, like, what else is there to do?
What else?
So I'd attempt these really intricate, weird dishes, mostly from TikTok, because I spent 70% of my time on there during COVID.
Same.
You still spend 70% of your
I
time
still
there
do.
now. So so I be so proud of like my creations, and I like take pictures and I show them and I update them on what I had. And then I think, well, I sometimes would tell them about uni, but it's not really a good thing because I think it goes in one ear and out the other.
Okay.
Because I'll tell them like, oh, I'm stressed from uni, hoping to get some like
Support.
empathy.
Yeah.
My parents just go like, okay, well, that's too bad. Like, oh, okay, what are you gonna do? Like,
That's life.
yeah, like, oh, okay. How's that gonna work? Like, oh, okay, well, see ya.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So like, I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's nice to get it out there somehow. I can't keep tweeting to no one.
Yeah.
Like, you know. Yes, one good thing was like sharing my cooking creations with them. Second good thing was probably, well, just giving general updates on my stress levels
Yeah.
to proper human beings is nice, even if they're not really listening. Just having them there nod is better than like tweeting it into
Oblivion.
Yeah. I'm really reaching with these good things now. The third
one.
third good
One
thing
more.
is that I don't know, like I get to say that I talk to my family, I guess, because like I hear people say that they talk to their family all the time, or like they have some form of relationship with them. So it's nice for a bit to be like, oh yeah, I need to go and do something on a Sunday, like it's to talk to my family or to catch up with my family. It's nice to have some like check mark, you know, of like when I'm gonna catch up with them, because everyone else did have some kind of thing in place, or they lived with their family. So that was nice that I had somebody there, that wasn't going to, you know, because it wasn't like my partner or anything that might just leave at some point, you know. They're like my actual family.
Like they're stuck with you. And you're stuck with them.
So that was I guess it's a nice constant, I'd say. So I think those are three good things.
And then in contrast, what are some of the challenges that you faced?
Challenges? Just three?
It doesn't say how many. I know this is probably going to be more.
How much time do we have? Well, okay.
Just a couple.
Well, the first one I can really think of is because of the time difference. Actually, I can't blame the time difference for it, but I had a very inconsistent schedule during COVID, because it's like I had a hard time waking up at 7 a.m. like not people normally do, or like 9 a.m. or at some reasonable hour. So I'd be like up on my laptop doing school stuff because I could procrastinate the shit out of everything. And then obviously I'd be up doing work until 5 a.m. I think it also lines up with like when you're drinking, you know, you start drinking at like 3 p.m. And then goes on and on and on. It's like no one starts drinking at 10 a.m. Like if you do, I mean, unless you're going for brunch, like boozy brunch. But that's besides the point.
No.
But like I feel like 3 p.m., 4 p.m. is a reasonable hour to start drinking. And then naturally you just kind of start sleeping at 3 a.m. because, you know, you can. Yeah, because you... Yeah. And then so when I wake up at like 11 or 12 and I'm supposed to have a Zoom call with my family, that's a bit difficult because I'm not usually awake at that hour. Like it's a reasonable hour to be awake, don't get me wrong. Like it's not their fault or anything. It's not, well, it's probably my fault. But so I think that actually is more of a problem that has to do with me. Like just I had a very inconsistent schedule, and then having to remember, I have to do this one thing at a certain time every single Sunday was taking a bit of the joy out of being free. I just felt like I always had to sit down that 1 hour and like listen to some priest talk about infidelity in marriage or some shit like that. And I sometimes...
So it was like just things that you wouldn't really want to hear at that time.
Yeah, sometimes I need to be doing other things as well, you know, uni stuff, you know how it is. Yeah. And then, so that kind of gets in the way of things. And then I think also because Melbourne started opening up before Singapore did, so they were still insisting on doing the online masses while I was already like going out and doing stuff, and I had band practice afterwards, like for every single week. And then I had to make sure that it's on Saturday, not Sunday. And then if my friend can't make it on Saturday, then I have to push it to Sunday, but I have to go home early, or I have to do it from my friend's house. And that was a lot of work around. So that's one of the negative things. But again, I feel like that's more of my horrible time management than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's pretty good. Like, just the communication with your family and making that work. And, I mean, you went to go see them as well, so...
Yeah, I tried not to, actually, but they were insisting, because I was already in Indonesia.
Yeah.
It was like a, 1 hour flight back to Singapore. So...
At least you got to see them for a bit and got to catch up with them, and now you can sort of... Like, there's that distance that's still there now, which is good. Yeah. Which is good for the both of you, because you're both sort of, you're not driving each other crazy.
Yeah, and I think they've also come to terms with the fact that I don't want to stay in Singapore and I want to stay in Melbourne. It's and they still support me in that decision. They don't know why. They just know that I want it, and they still support me, which... that I think that's one of the reasons I also remind myself, yes, my relationship with my parents might be strained, but they're not horrible people.
Yeah.
They're trying their best.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying
it's just difference in opinion.
They're just different. Yeah. So, like, I guess
it's still a respecting relationship.
Yeah, I guess all in all, it's like, we have our differences, and I might have some intense childhood trauma, but it's not really... their fault per se, you know. It's just, I think a lot of Asian kids have that same trauma, you know.
Yeah.
So I think as an adult, realizing that now, I've been trying to repair my relationship with my parents. Although I don't think they realize that I'm really viewing it that way.
Yeah, well, it might be a good way to talk with them.
No, it's fine. I'd rather not.
So now we're going into the open mic section of the show. In the very last section, you get to talk about anything that you were passionate about or working on. So yeah, I'm going to give you the floor, and you get to talk about, for the last few minutes, I got about 3 minutes or so, you get to talk about anything that you are passionate about right now.
Okay. Well... You're going to have to time me, because I tend to, like...
I'll let you know.
Waffle on for God knows how long. I've been working on some songs. I've been writing some songs. I've tried to write songs in the past with my band member, Amel, but they're pretty shit, to be honest. And we never really had that, like, creative role until recently, because I went through a breakup. And
as you do,
you know,
the best motivation.
Heartbreak breeds creativity.
It does.
You know, it's the best motivation for writing songs. Surprisingly, didn't write that many songs about the heartbreak itself, but like I guess after also like meeting my parents again and coming back, then I started being more reflective on life in general, and then started writing things down, and eventually I just wrote like a bunch of songs in the past month. I think maybe like 15 complete songs, 30 that like kind of neither here nor there. Yeah. And so my band member and I, we're trying to like produce them, but we are rookies, so it's been taking a while. And I don't know if we'll ever release them, to be honest. So I don't know if there's a point in talking about it in the first place, but we really hope to at some point. But we're completely independent, and so it might take a while. But we really like what we're doing, and we've been trying to like branch out from not just like love songs, because I mean love songs are great. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of like both empathy and apathy, you know, for different reasons. Yeah. And universally relatable. But the other day, you know what I wrote a song about? I wrote a song about how McSpicy is too McPricey. Like it's too expensive. And then it's also surprisingly it's a bit more expensive than PTV, taking PTV.
So if you guys don't know, PTV is our public transport system.
Public transport. Yeah. It's more expensive than public, like just a bit. Like a round trip in public transport in Victoria, that's like $9 and what, 40 cents?
About that, yeah.
about their
Yeah.
McSpicy is $9.60. It's about the same, but it goes
Yeah.
to show like it's really expensive to, number one, take public transport in Victoria,
Yes.
and number two, have a meal.
And then you had sometimes to pick between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you got to, like, if like let's say you only have $10 on your left, right? You have to choose between going back home and
Eating.
and eating.
Yeah.
Like what? That's kind of, yeah. So that's what the song is about. I don't know if it's actually gonna be a proper song though, because it's kind of like I think I try to insert humor as well.
Yeah, it was also a social issue.
It's kind of a social issue. I think it's a universal experience for people who have to scrape by.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. And there's a lot of different, I mean, the other songs that you've showed me are pretty good too.
Which songs have I showed you?
The one that you've posted up.
I can't remember.
There was one. I forgot the name of it now. We'll find it afterwards.
Oh, is it the one about how I'm inherently selfish and I talk too much when someone's trying to sleep? Yeah, because that's true.
Yeah.
That's very true. I talk way too much when someone's trying to sleep.
Well, on that note, I'm going to end that here. Thank you so much, Marie, for coming on to the show and talking about the relationship between you and your parents. Also talking about how important distance actually is to maintaining a healthy relationship. And I know we've spoken about the fact that being close together is always a good thing, but having another side of the story and sharing how important it is to also get some distance from not only your parent, but also your child as well, I think it's really important. So thank you, Marie, for joining me today.
Anytime.
And I will put links to resources or anything that you want to share down below. And thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you guys in the next episode. You've been listening to Altogether, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by Family Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at fa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant, and thanks for tuning in.